Uh, the council has had as a standing item on the council agenda an update on COVID-19. And so there's a couple topics that I want to talk about tonight. So the first topic is to follow up on a conversation we had about the summer operations programs and the use of lifeguards at the beaches. So one of the questions the council asked us to do was explore whether it would even be possible for us to lifeguard the beaches this summer, given COVID-19 and the uncertainty. Unfortunately, we've reached the conclusion that we're not going to be able to provide lifeguards at the beaches this summer. Our Parks Department reached out to as many of our former lifeguards and other possible lifeguards as we could. We felt that we need to have 40 trained beach lifeguards on staff in order to fully staff the beaches the way we normally have, the hours of 12 to 6. We did receive 26 expressions of interest out of the 40. The Parks Department and I explored whether we could consider things like only guarding certain beaches or possibly guarding for just certain hours. A couple things that came up that led us to recommend not doing that is that one of the concerns we have is lifeguard attrition. So even to have a few beaches, we'd have to assume that every guard could basically be available all throughout the summer without changes. And so first, we're concerned a little bit about people actually getting sick, whether it's COVID or something else. And then second, many of these lifeguards are in college, and universities throughout the country are changing their dates in order to start earlier and not have students return multiple times from the college or university. And so we're very much concerned about attrition of lifeguards throughout the summer. And so one of the things we talked through was it'd be tough to keep telling people, well, this week we're only guarding these 2 beaches and only for these hours, but next week we're going to be guarding this beach for these hours. And we feel it's far more certain to everybody if we just tell folks we're not going to be able to lifeguard the beaches this summer, but post it clearly. As an alternative, our recommendation, which came from the council, is to actually have a formal, official, our working title is Life Jacket Ambassador Program, and we may actually use some of these same 26 lifeguards as a starting point. But the goal is to have staff at the beaches checking out life jackets to anyone who wants them, and also keeping an eye on the water and having radio so that they could radio if there was any emergency that needed 911 service. And in addition, those lifeguard ambassadors could also help watch out for social distancing and other behaviors. So that's our official recommendation to you at this time. We think that provides the most certainty of a dedicated service that we can maintain, and also the most certainty for the public in terms of understanding what's going to happen in communication. So see if you have any questions before I go on to the next topic. Okay. Councilor Curtis, did you have a question, or you just, okay, thank you.
No, go ahead. Thank you.
The second one is just a short update. This is on boards and commissions. I want to talk to you about what we're doing. As I think most of you know, the boards and commissions that are advisory in nature to the City Council have been unable to meet during the governor's proclamations and Open Public Meeting Act extensions, where only items deemed necessary and routine could come before bodies. The city attorney has reviewed those work programs and has concluded, along with many other cities, that advisory boards and commissions don't meet the necessary and routine work, since they're advisory to the council and not necessary to the council. Exception of that being potentially some items that the Planning Commission would have had to deal with. So at this time, we haven't actually had them meet, but we now do have the capability to have them meet virtually, and those restrictions will be expiring this month. So this is just a heads up that the staff is evaluating when and how to restart some of those commissions. There's a couple things going into that. One is what work do we have for them to do, and the other is what staff do we have available to support that work. And so we're having conversations right now about staff capacity to provide support so that the commissions can meet and do some work on behalf of the city. Primarily the reason that we're dealing with this is that the staff that normally support commissions are also staff that are somewhat exposed to the budget discussions that we're having. And we're also juggling some of the budget implications of some of the early retirements that we're seeing and the voluntary separation agreement. So we're going to be doing that quickly in the next couple of weeks, and we'll have much more information for the council about restarting the boards and commissions, commission by commission, board by board, and we'll bring that back to the council. But the good news is we do know we have the technology to have the virtual meetings, and so we'll be able to make them happen if we determine we're able to support them. The primary, Mr. Deputy Mayor Arnold.
Thank you. Is one of the considerations you're looking at the capability for doing public comments virtually in a way that we've done public hearings, because one of the things we rely on our boards and commissions is to synthesize a lot of public comment and come to us with recommendations or options based on what they have heard. And I recognize that starting up boards and commission meetings again is not only a staff hit on the policy experts on staff, but also on our IT staff as well. If these meetings are going to need to be continued to held virtually, at least through the summer.
Yeah, thank you, David Demir. That is one of the things we'll be evaluating. I mean, the good news is from running council meetings, we now know we have the capability. We also did have some hearing examiner public hearings that were already put on by the IT staff and the planning staff. So we know the ability is there. We just have to sort of assess capacity. And we're trying to get to that very quickly because if something is going to happen, we obviously want to restart those when we can. And we know you just reviewed and appointed new boards and commission members. So we want to make sure we can provide that service if we can. And then finally, I want to just touch briefly on what happened the last couple of days, which is actually not really COVID related, but it was definitely impacted and shaped by the COVID pandemic in terms of response. And that was the issues related to some of the protests and riots following the death of George Floyd. We got a lot of questions over the last couple of days, and I thought maybe I would just take this moment to try to address some of them, and certainly not all of them. And the people who did write in will also be sending formal responses to in our Q alert. But one of the questions that came up a lot was basically what was the decision of the city to recommend to businesses to shut down yesterday afternoon and today, and what was that based on? So I want to talk to you about that. So we had quite a bit of information. We had activated our Emergency Operations Center over the weekend as we saw what happened in Bellevue and Seattle and other cities around Washington and also throughout the country. So we had seen firsthand that protests that began as peaceful protests were unfortunately corrupted by people with other intent and became often violent and oftentimes became covers for people to do property destruction and theft. We, the City of Kirkland, was part of a fusion center of police, law enforcement, intelligence gathering, and we also specifically monitored a lot of social media channels with our detectives and our PROACT unit. All that information told us over the weekend that we were likely, if there was a protest, to have some criminal elements along with that protest who would be more interested in property damage and in theft. So we didn't know if that would happen. We hoped that it would not, but we did know that we were going to get a protest march, and we had seen the pattern already in Bellevue and Seattle, and we'd also sent staff, both police and fire staff, to support those cities. So we had a lot of very good firsthand information of what happens if you're not prepared. When we knew for a fact that the protest was coming and that there was likely to be potential interaction, we made the proactive decision to go ahead and notify the businesses that we strongly advised that they closed. We did not mandate it, and we did not do a curfew, which other cities did, because we didn't know. And we obviously hoped for the best. At the same time, our police chief personally reached out to the State Patrol and our neighbors and the National Guard to see if we'd get support in case we did see some sort of event unfold in the way it had in Bellevue and Seattle. We were very, very pleased that our neighbors in Redmond sent their bicycle unit. We also had the Washington State Patrol Civil Unrest team here, and we had the work divided up into two parts. One, part of the police department to safely support the march and the protest and the constitutional right to assemble, and the second in reserve in case something did happen. So that was really the decision, was trying to be proactive. We saw how quickly those things could get out of control. We wanted to offer businesses the choice and the information that we had. We wanted to take our best efforts to make sure we didn't see that kind of destruction and theft in Kirkland. But it was a judgment call ultimately made at our operations center with a recommendation to the chief, to me, and eventually it was ultimately my decision to go ahead and make that recommendation. Once the event started to unfold, the second question we've gotten a lot of questions about was the presence of people downtown with rifles and other weapons, open carrying. We've got a lot of comments on that about why did the city allow that to happen, or what could the city have done differently. We also received some comments from people saying they were thankful that they were down there. So without weighing in one way or the other on how anyone comes down on that issue, I just want to let everybody know that under both the federal Constitution and the Washington State Constitution, there is the right to bear arms, and in Washington, there's a right to legally bear arms. And we are an open carry state, so a person is allowed to legally carry a weapon that is out and open and visible. And so all of the folks who did come down, the city of Kirkland did not invite them to come down. We did not encourage it, but it's also not illegal for that to happen, and there's really nothing the city can do if they do come down. And so what we did in this case, which we do in every case like this, is the police department makes contact with every one of those, has a conversation, tries to build a rapport to understand why they're there, what their intent is, has some very good dialogue, and then just as we do at the protests, we pay close attention to what happens throughout the interaction. We watch what happens as the events unfold. So we were very aware of their presence. We had made contact with each of them. The police talked through their purpose in being there, but ultimately they were there legally, and the city can't make a decision one way or another as to whether those people are allowed to be there. So just want to get all of that on the record. Again, we're going to be replying to this, but because there's a lot of questions about it, I thought it'd be really helpful to just cover those two issues. Finally, and then I'll open up for questions, we did tonight send out an update that we believe businesses could choose to reopen again based on what we know today. And so we did issue that it's our suggestion that they may reopen, but that they should stay vigilant. There is still a lot of activity going on around the region. It's still possible that we could see a return of something related to theft or property damage, but at this point we don't think we're going to see that in the city of Kirkland. But we're maintaining a close eye on all of those things. So happy to answer questions about any of that if any council member has a question or a comment.
Council questions? Councilmember Curtis?
Thank you, Kurt. When police make contact with the gentleman open carrying, do we check for their open carry permits?
Chief is not here. I don't believe you need an open carry permit to open carry. I believe you just open carry. I see Councilmember Nixon.
Councilmember Nixon has something to say.
Yeah, Washington does not require a permit to carry a weapon openly. The only time you need a permit is if you are carrying a pistol concealed. Of course, there are circumstances under which you're not allowed to carry a gun at all, like if you're a convicted felon or if you have a domestic violence protective order against you. There's a long list of those kind of things. But yeah, there's no permit required. And that's not something the city could create because it's preempted by state law.
Right. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, that concludes my COVID-19 update for tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. This takes us to item B, the 2020 Fire Department Strategic Plan Update. I'll let you get to your chair and call on the city manager.
All right. So thank you, Madam Mayor. So this is a periodic update that we provide to the council on the results of our last strategic plan that we did in 2012. And the council gets this report, and we also give progress and sort of next steps to complete the strategic plan.